I'd like to call to order the July 1st meeting of the Citizens Advisory Commission. If we could start with a roll call, please.
Ogleton, Westmoreland, Cooper,
Here.
Lord, Hodges, Rasso Adela, Bird,
Here.
Holloway excused, Gilmore,
Here.
Kiefer excused, Johnson R,
Present.
Nolan,
Present.
Rasso Allen, Patel.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item will be citizens with CAC business to address to the council. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is review and approve minutes of the May 6, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I would motion to move the report.
All right. Okay, I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And on to the next item, which is the appointment of the grievance subcommittee. At this meeting, we had, we selected some volunteers, but we missed it on the record. So if you were one of those volunteers, could I see your hand? Okay, got 1, 2. Oh, Elizabeth, did you?
Yeah, I said if you need that extra person, I can.
If you do.
Because I'm in the right neighborhood, but I want
Okay.
to give everybody else an opportunity.
Gotcha. And then I think we had waited for Joseph Ogleton, but so we can move along. I can step in myself. And then we needed 5, correct, Heather?
We do need 5. So with the 3 that you've mentioned, Cooper, Nolan, and Hodges, we have 2 of the 3 that we would need in the LMI census tracts. And you would step up yourself, is that right?
Correct.
So that would be our 3rd. And so the 5th member could be anyone.
Good volunteer. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so if I'm documenting this correctly, we have Bird, Cooper, Hodges, Nolan, and Lord as the grievance subcommittee. Okay?
And that did not require a vote, correct?
No, the grievance subcommittee does not require a vote, just for the record for everyone and anybody listening at home. The grievance subcommittee is appointed by the chair of the CAC and recommended to the mayor for appointment. So essentially, the chair accepts the volunteers, and we will forward those on behalf of the chair to the mayor, who will, assuming he accepts them, I can't see why he wouldn't, he will appoint them at a city council meeting to be named later.
Thank you, Heather. On to the preview of the Year 51 public input process.
Okay. I'm getting a tiny bit of feedback, so I'm trying to speak quietly. Does everyone have their microphones off? Maybe the table is on or something? Nope, everything's off, so I don't know why that would be. This is where Fred Clausen would come and adjust things over here and make the sound better. So, a summary of the public input process. So I know we have a couple of very new members, so I will just give you a little overview of what the process is, kind of where we are in the process, and then the plan for the summer. HUD requires every year that we submit an annual plan. And in that plan, we have to lay out what it is that we are intending to do with the grant. The CDBG program and the home program, they're what's called entitlement grants, meaning that We are guaranteed to get something every year as long as Congress appropriates money for it, but we are not guaranteed any specific dollar amount. So it could be a smaller number, it could be a bigger number, but either way, we have to submit an annual plan each year. In addition to just a standard annual plan, every 5 years we have to submit what's called a consolidated plan. And so in that 5-year plan, we're going a little bit beyond what we would do in an annual plan. The intention is in the 5-year plan, we go out, we get public input, we talk to people, we do studies, we review data, and we determine what are the general areas of need. That's what it's called in the plan, the general areas of need. And so we determine, what those are. I mean, obviously, there's probably a lot more needs in the community than the money can address. But CDBG is a pretty broad program, and so, generally it seems like there's a way to try to fit most of those things in that benefit low and moderate income people. So in the plan, we lay out the general areas of need. And we also set the 5-year goals. So the goals for what we're going to do over the course of the 5 years. And then each year within that 5 years, we submit the annual plan. And the annual plan has to have local objectives in it that tie back to the needs that we identify in the 5-year plan. So we can't in year 3 just decide willy-nilly to start doing something that wasn't in our existing 5-year plan. We would need to do an amendment process and a separate process to be able to do that. So I mention all of this because the public input that we're preparing to do right now is for the first year of that 5-year plan. So it is literally July 1st today, and we just started year 50, the 50th year of CDBG. But the public input that we're planning to do this summer is for year 51, which will start July 1st of 2025, and that will start the first year of our new 5-year plan. So the input that we plan to do, we do input every year. The intention is every year we want to make sure nothing really huge has changed in our community, or if it has, that we have a way to address those new items. But for the 5-year plan, we go a little bit beyond that. So we do a survey, but we also have to do some public input meetings, some focus groups. HUD has certain classes and stakeholder groups that we're required to consult. So as staff, we will be doing that over the next several months with the intention that when we meet in October, we will present you with the results of this input process and the studies that we're working on, and help you in determining what the needs and the local objectives will be for our upcoming 5 years. So that's kind of the plan that we're launching into at the moment. So in your packet, which I would like to point out has page numbers at the bottom, just, apropos of nothing. On page 7, there is kind of a 1.5-page document of proposed public input. And it's just a summary. It's not intended to be exhaustive because we're likely going to add and take away from this as situations changes. So the intention is that we will do a survey, just as we always do. The difference with this year, as I was talking with Austin, is we're proposing for this 5-year plan to do our survey in partnership with Moline and Rock Island. And the reason for that is, well, it's possible for one reason, and that is HUD several years ago had an initiative to do a different kind of study in addition to the annual plan and the consolidated plan. And so they had a big push to have cities and regions align their 5-year plans with each other. So instead of year 51 being our first year of a 5-year plan, and year 52 being Moline's, and year 53 being Rock Island's, we were all kind of staggered. They pushed us a few years ago to consolidate or to align our 5-year plan years. And so this year upcoming, 2025, will be the first year all 3 of us have been on the same 5-year plan cycle. So previous to this, we weren't able to align our public input for our 5-year plans because we were all on different years. But now we will be all on the same 5-year plan cycle. So we thought it would be a good time to maybe, instead of each individually doing a survey and public input at the same time, to try to do some of those things together. We are a region, we have a shared housing market, a shared employment market. There's lots of reasons that makes sense. And among those reasons is for 15 years past and for the next 5 years forward, we are doing some other studies in conjunction with each other. So there's 2 studies that are required as part of preparing to do a 5-year plan. One is called the Housing Needs Assessment, and one is called the Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice. And those are big undertakings, and almost every city, if not every city that I can think of, hires consultants to do that. It's pretty comprehensive. And so for 15 years, Moline, Rock Island, and Davenport have shared the cost of doing those studies. We've done them as a region. And we have started the process to hire a consultant to do those studies now. So the consultant has already been hired. They'll be doing public input this summer too. So since we're doing those 2 studies in conjunction with each other, and we're doing a public input process for those studies, it makes sense that we would also be doing the public input for our plans kind of at the same time. But just to reassure everyone, the way that we intend to do the survey together, we will make zip code a mandatory field in the online version, and then we'll be able to divide out the responses so that each city will get its own unique responses. And then any that are from outside of our individual cities, so if we get someone from, Scott County or Henry County or something, we will just share those based on state, so if the zip codes aren't within the 3 actual cities, we'll just share them. The Illinois will get the Illinois, and Iowa will get the Iowa. So that's kind of our plan of attack for the survey. In addition to the survey, we'll be doing some public input meetings. So in a formal way, we intend to have an online public input meeting and perhaps some in-person ones, but also we call them like pop-up input opportunities or in-person on-site opportunities. So in the past, we've done things like go to the farmer's market, go to the mall. We've done things down at the Freight House when they have events going on. We try to just be where people already are, because it's sometimes hard to get people to want to do surveys and inputs, and so you kind of have to catch them where they already are instead of trying to make them come to you. So we intend to do some opportunities like that. And as I mentioned, there are some required stakeholder groups that we must consult, and we intend to do some focus groups for those. So those would be people like education, educators, school districts, colleges, utility companies. We have to consult the county on disaster preparedness as part of the plan. So there's some kind of very particular input that we need that is different from public input as a whole. We wouldn't necessarily, put on a survey and hope someone answers us about disaster preparedness. We will reach out directly to the disaster preparedness people and talk to them about it. So that's kind of our plan for the consultation or the input part of it. And then I do want to just I mentioned briefly already the studies that we're working on, the housing needs assessment and the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. But in addition to that, there are some studies, some data that HUD provides. American Community Survey is a product of the U.S. Census Bureau, and HUD does some special tabulations of that information specific for 5-year plans, and we're expecting that data to come in the fall. And then additionally, there's a data set that HUD gets called CHAS, which is, I'm blanking on what it means, Comprehensive Housing Affordable Strategy. And so that's it's a specific contracted data collection that HUD does on its own and then provides it to cities. And that's supposed to be updated this fall as well. So one of the things that we often hear from CAC members or elected officials is, you do these surveys and you only get 200 responses, and then we base all of this money on 200 responses. And my answer to that is always, we don't only base it on that. HUD requires that we look at all these data sources. And so with this public input, we're looking for themes. We're saying we're hearing we need affordable housing, or we're hearing we need job training, or we're hearing we need financial counseling from people. And then we turn around and look, what does the data say? And we look for supporting information. So if the census is saying, if the census is saying we don't need affordable housing, but every person is saying we do, then that would be a red flag, and just as likely vice versa. If the census is saying we desperately need affordable housing, but that's not what we're hearing in our focus groups, then we probably still need to incorporate that. So the point is that we get the input from individuals and from businesses and from companies and other governments, and we get the studies and we make those, kind of mesh those in and stir them around and get out themes. And those become our general areas of need in the plan. So they kind of reinforce and support each other. So we're expecting all 4 of those studies to come in this fall, in time for us to hopefully include them for our October meeting. And the reason that we do that at the October meeting is because that launches our application cycle for year 51. The local objectives and the needs that you'll determine there will become part of our application process that starts in November. So we're sitting here on July 1st and already planning for a year from today. So that's kind of the overview. Now, we bring this to you for a lot of reasons, because, it's your responsibility to know about it, but also we rely on the CAC for input and ideas. So I've included copies of the survey that we have used. We make tweaks to it from time to time. We are doing this in conjunction with Rock Island and Moline, and so they too are going through the survey to see what it is that they might want added or taken away, and we actually have a meeting on it tomorrow. This is a draft. The survey will likely be in this format and likely have many of these main questions, but we can add things and we can tweak the wording of things to where we can in conjunction with our partners. So I'm sure they'll have some questions they want to bring to the table, and we'll have some questions we want to bring to the table, and we'll kind of all mush them together and come up with a final product. And so the CAC doesn't necessarily vote to approve the survey, never has that happened, but we want to give you an opportunity for input. And what we usually say is we sent it out last week, and we'll give you this whole week into next week. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, if you have them now and want to talk about them, we're happy to talk about them. But if you need to ponder a little bit and send them to us by email or give us a call, we'll take those suggestions as well and incorporate them, with the intention that the survey will go live in the next couple of weeks, depending on the changes Moline and Rock Island have as well. So we do have the survey here in English and in Spanish. Last year we translated it into Spanish, and we did get 2 responses in Spanish last year. So just interesting to know. And then, so we rely on the CAC for suggestions for what you might want to know, because this survey will inform the local objectives that will inform the application you will be scoring. So if there's things in the application process that you're like, gosh, I wish I knew this, if that's something that's appropriate for a survey, we can try to put that in there. And then the other reason we bring the public input to the CAC is suggestions for ideas of where we can go or who we should be reaching out to. So if there are groups that you think that we should make contact with, or if there's an event that you know of that you think that it might be good for us to go to, send those to us or ask us, and we'll see if we can work that in somehow.
Thank you, Heather. Is there any discussion?
One suggestion, and you didn't say it, but you probably do it anyway, is the party in the park. The party in the park is just, there's families, there's kids, it's very laid back, very social. It's not, the farmer's market is pretty structured, well, we need sweet corn, we need this, and then they're, It'd be like having it in a grocery store, I would
Yeah.
think, but.
Yeah, we have done, each year there has been a party in the park. We go to each one. So,
great.
each department of the city, usually at Party in the Park has a table. And so one of our staffers, whether it's Dawn or I, or just another person on our department, we always include our, we always include our survey and whatever other, whether it's our survey or something else, it seems like we're always trying to get input for something. So, so whatever it is we have that's going on at that moment, you're right, Party in the Park is a great opportunity to get it out there. And usually we'll come and we have activities for kids. And in fact, Dawn was just planning her activities for kids today. We're gonna do adventure sticker books for the kids and let them color a sticker book. And hopefully then their parents will linger nearby and we can assault them with a survey.
Thank you. And any other comments? I have one to add. I went and looked at the 2023 survey just before we came here, and I tried to go through it even though it's expired. And I had to do it like 4 times because after every question, when there were multiple questions on the same page, you had to hit OK, but it came before the question. So you'd have to hit OK, read the question, answer the question. Then next it was like, okay, then read the question, answer it. And it,
Okay.
yeah.
So just like more of like a
and I didn't know-
pagination thing?
I didn't know maybe that was because of the age of the survey or something, but I can.
Yeah.
That leads into another question, I guess, of do we know how many people start surveys but don't finish them online?
We do it through survey, so I know it was in the packet, but I'll say it as well. We do the survey both in paper and online. So the online iteration of the survey is through SurveyMonkey. And yes, SurveyMonkey, it gives you all the results that somebody filled out at least one question on. And so you can infer from that, like everybody completed question 1, but only 70% of the people completed question 2. So it'll give you like metrics by question. So we know if they filled out at least one question, it will capture the data from it. If somebody looked at it and never filled anything out, then we wouldn't be able to get that number. But at least if they filled out one, then we would know. And then the paper versions, just so everybody knows, the paper version is what I've included here in the packet. But the online, we get a lot more responses from online, but we do still get a good number of paper ones. And we make paper ones available at city buildings, so City Hall, Public Works, River's Edge, places like that. We also make them available to any nonprofit that wants them, and they do request them. So we'll print out, 25 or 30 copies and drop them off. And if they need more, we'll give them more. So, but in recent years, we definitely are getting more of the online than the in-person. And especially we do like little QR codes. Which with everybody with cell phones now, the QR codes have really made a big difference in people being able on the spot they don't have to write down the email address or remember to click a link. They just take a picture of it, go straight to it and fill it out. So we try to make it as easy as we can. Recognizing it's still federal stuff, and so it isn't going to be like, it's never going to be like one of those surveys you take where it's like happy face and sad face, which do you like? Like there has to be more nuance to it than that, but we try to make it as easy as we can.
Thank you. I just have a quick question, just a quick thought on one of the first questions, and I know I've seen it a few times, but on the very first question about the funds, whether it's specific or citywide, is there is there an option for the funds to be somehow in a combination?
So the suggested third option would be, so one is in a specific area, one is citywide. So citywide to me implies that it's everywhere. So what would the third option? I'm open to it.
Yes,
I think
yes.
we can. I just
And I don't know how you would
need help
explain that.
visualizing it.
I understand that citywide does encapsulate a specific area.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that when people read it, some may, they may be apt to answer one way or another. I don't know.
Like more of like a case by case? Is that
Yeah,
what
I
we're
feel like it's
um,
like, in some ways, it seems like it's like a all or nothing
Got
kind of
it.
answer.
Okay, so like a question, something like, let me read the words actually. So it says, Davenport has the option to focus funds based on the income of residents. Would you like to see funds focused on a specific area of the city or available citywide? We could put in the wording or a combination of the two and just put an option that says, specific area. Maybe
mean, just 'cause-
we expand it. Here's this is what comes to my mind. Programs can be available citywide or focused to specific areas based on income. Do you support all programs being citywide, all programs being specific area, or some programs being citywide and some programs being specific areas? Does that get
Yeah,
there? Okay.
that to me seems clear.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm just assuming, but I mean, you know, we have different types of programs and we would want to be able to offer that might be different for a specific area versus what would we
Yeah.
be available to offer citywide because of the average income?
Yeah.
Okay,
Specific areas. I mean, all CDBG or the majority of CDBG money has to primarily benefit low and moderate income people, and especially our housing programs, but, and economic development. But we can say, I think there's room. I get where you're going, I think now. I didn't at first, but now I do. And I think we can make the question more specific to programs and say, do you want all programs to be available everywhere? Do you want some programs to be available in specific places, or all programs to be in specific places? Kind of like that. Okay. I think we got that one.
Any other comment? Actually, one more from me. Sorry, and I hate to even say this because you say you have a meeting tomorrow, but why is it phrased such as like choose 3 services in this category? Because I would think that, and especially with that first question, what if you could create questions instead of selecting a category? It would say the roads in my neighborhood are good. 1 to 5 scale, or, you know, poor to good. The roads citywide are, and that, there's a lot in there, that's a lot of work to change things, I acknowledge it, but I thought that might be a little bit easier, and then you could even not think so much about the categories, you could think about categories in the back end, but people could just then kind of rate their questions and you get a list of priorities.
And I see what you're saying, and I agree. So to me, there's 2 parts of the question. One is, why do you have them choose 3? And it's just because you have to rank them in some way, top 3. But then the underlying question, I think, is why are there categories like this? And the answer to that, we've tried different surveys through the years and evolved it in different ways. But in the last 5-year plan, we adopted this style of survey, in part because there was some feeling at that time that the survey we were using it was sort of a self-reinforcing, or could be perceived as that, because we were only asking about the things we were already doing. And so the feeling at that time was, well, you should be asking about everything CDBG could do, whether we're doing it or not, because how do you know if somebody wants it if you're not asking the question? And so everything that's in the survey at its current iteration, those are the things CDBG can do. So we got away from more open-ended questions, in part because we did get a lot of answers like, the streets in my neighborhood are not great, but CDBG can't necessarily do streets except in specific situations, which gets back to the question about low-mod area versus not low-mod area. And so, so essentially everything that's these categories, housing, economic development, infrastructure, and public services, those are the 4 categories of things that HUD specifies that CDBG can do. And then under them, there are these things for HUD called matrix codes, and there's about 120 of them. and it is absolutely everything that CDBG could possibly pay for under the sun. If it's not on that list, it can't be paid for. If it is on that list, it could possibly be paid for depending on the circumstance. And so essentially what we did when we went to this version, which was in the last 5-year plan, was kind of whittle down and condense those 120 into probably about 50 different categories, because we didn't want to put 120 in front of people. So I can say we could probably condense this further, but I would probably recommend against going to a more open-ended question, because we did get, I think the input we were getting, while probably a more accurate representation of concerns people might have in that moment, ended up with a lot of things that CDBG could never do. And so for our purposes, it probably wasn't as useful, because you just ended up with a lot of things that, CDBG couldn't accomplish for them.
And I was kind of thinking more like opinion-based, based off of the roads was a bad
Yeah,
example, I guess.
no,
but,
I
take, this, in my neighborhood, this is good, especially if we're using zip codes now.
Sure.
It's,
Yeah,
this is,
no, that's,
rather than kind of looking at it as like, we offer this service or we have something in the realm of this service, is this element of my life good? 1 to 5, and then prior,
Okay.
and again,
Yeah.
you have a meeting tomorrow, I'm not.
oh, no, I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's some question about that too. So also, Moline and Rock Island already have looked at this as well, but it's not written in stone from their side either. So tomorrow is where we're kind of gonna hash through like what they would maybe want versus what we would maybe want and try to smush it together. But to put everyone's mind at ease, I wouldn't expect, I think there's a general consensus that we're gonna try to include something like this where everything that CDBG could do is included, and around it build the extra stuff we might want. So maybe there might be some satisfaction questions that we can ask that would be agreeable to all parties, and see if maybe there's something that we can do of that nature. The other thing about the survey, which I didn't say but is in the packet, is once we kind of settle on the 5-year survey, we try not to take things away from it during the 5 years, because then we can compare them across years, but we can always add to it. So during the 5 years, we can add things back in. So if a satisfaction thing is a thing that you want, even if we can't come to consensus with Moline and Rock Island on that, it doesn't mean we can't add it next year when it's just our survey again, instead of an area-wide survey. So that would be maybe a potential thing too. So, but we'll talk it through with them and see what we can do.
Thank you again. You answered kind of one of my first, I had a question and a thought, but I was like, so what we'll compare all of the surveys, we'll probably see something all together new. I mean, if it's combination, right?
It could be. Well, I will say too, so our survey was developed, as I said, with the last 5-year plan, and you may remember Megan, who was with us. She's moved on from the city now, but she worked with me to develop the survey. And actually, Moline and Rock Island are already using the survey
okay.
because they like the format of it, and Adela probably
Okay.
can speak to that. So they're using, I won't say verbatim, but very close to
very
what we're
similar
using.
already? Okay.
Yeah, and so are several cities in Wisconsin, if I'm beating my own drum.
Nice,
I think that the idea, there's never a perfect tool. There's just never gonna be. So there's always room for improvement. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to stay this way. But I would not expect that all 3 cities would now suddenly all kind of say, we want an entirely different framework. But maybe they could. I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow.
Well, so then my thought was, and I agree with Austin's thought on instead of just the, pick 3, where it's one of those I strongly agree, agree, disagree, type of,
Yeah.
and maybe there's just a handful of new questions
Yes.
that are worded that way, something.
Yeah,
Anyway,
like-
just a thought, an idea,
Yeah.
but
And I think,
that was all.
no, strongly I can get the point of it here, just from like my chicken scratches. But yeah, I think there's room for something like that. And so, I guess what I would propose if we're gonna go that direction would be we come up with, and I'll talk with the staff at Molina Rock Island tomorrow and see what we can do, but I would say if we can come up with some questions that can be rated in that way, but that are CDBG, more focused on CDBG than general city satisfaction. So, you know, I feel like the CDBG program is meeting my needs, or there's something that can help me, you know, of that nature. If we could keep it in that realm, I think that it might be useful for all of us as well, if that's amenable to the group. Yep, okay.
Oh, I just had a comment to keep in mind. The bigger the survey, the less people are going to take it, because, and I am one of those. If you give me this long survey and say, hey, I want you to sit down and take it, I'm like, no. You want to make it fast and easy so they can whip through it and say, here you go. So we just need to keep that in mind also.
Yes.
Any other comments or ideas on people to reach out to, organizations, brainstorm? All right, seeing that.
And I would just say, remember, it's not final yet. So if something strikes you tomorrow or in the next few days, we're going to keep it, we're going to meet with them tomorrow, and we'll leave it open until at least next Monday. So a full other additional week. And then we'll wrap up whatever the final format is. And then once we have that and it goes live, we'll let you know. We do rely on CAC members to share the links and the opportunity to participate among your personal and professional networks. The strength of a group of this size is that we can reach a lot of corners through all of you. And so once we have those links, we'll send them out to you, and hope that you can share them with us.
Okay, I'm ready for my question now. So we do the survey. HUD gives a package of funds to disperse. And this survey is actually more for the city economic development, right? It's not for the individual programs, the nonprofit organizations.
So the programs are shared. We share the link far and wide with anybody who wants it, basically. But the subrecipient agencies that we currently have are typically very eager to share that with their clients, to, you know, get them to participate and get their perspective shared. So it does go out to our existing subrecipients, in addition to lots and lots of other groups that might want to participate. But the survey, along with those studies I mentioned and the focus groups and things like that, they're all going to kind of be mushed together. And when we come back in October, our hope is that we'll be able to generate for you a list of themes, which are the general areas of need. And those will come back to the CAC to help set the needs for the next 5-year plan. So it isn't that the survey necessarily is saying we're going to fund these agencies or not. It's saying what is it that people want us to prioritize in the next 5 years, not necessarily that it's an individual agency that we're going to fund at any given time. It's more to like get an idea of what the needs are out there in the community.
But how does that get applied? How does that get discerned?
Okay, good question. So, so we as staff will kind of comb through the data and come up with a summary for you. And it will have side by side kind of the highlights of the survey responses, the highlights of the focus groups, the highlights of, you know, the public meetings, things like that. And then also the highlights of the data that we get from HUD and from the studies. So you'll have, you know, all of that kind of together. And we will say, here's the themes that we see there. then the CAC will recommend to the city council the development of the general areas of need for the plan and also the local objectives, which we do every year. So if you remember in October, the CAC will set local objectives. Those get incorporated into the application that the agencies fill out. So we're saying, in the plan, we're saying, here's what our needs are. We're setting a local objective every year that says this is how we're going to meet the needs this year. And then we put out an application to agencies that says, agencies, if you want to apply for money, tell us how you meet these local objectives. So every step gets tied back to the one before it. So does that make sense?
It does
Okay.
make sense, because as we review the RFP to do the weighting, the scale, and evaluate them, they know and they'll learn in their workshops to draw into some of these areas if it applies. Because that, and if they answer correctly, that's how
Yeah.
you analyze an RFP to give it its weighting so that they could potentially receive more money from the bucket?
So the application, at least in its current format, it has a question in the application. It's the highest point total question that they can get. And the question says, here are our local objectives. How do you meet these local objectives? And so that category of points is the highest point total that they can get, because we have to be funding things that tie back to our plan. We can't fund things that don't. So the burden is on them to make the case for why they fall under those local objectives and the needs that we have in our plan. And then the CAC, when you score them, you kind of evaluate that answer, and each of you assigns a point total to say, I think they hit the nail on the head, or maybe they fell a little short, so they get fewer points. And then that ranking, whoever kind of, as a whole application, the higher scores, the formula will recommend a higher dollar amount. And that question is part of it. It's not the only part of it, but their score depends on a whole lot of things. But the biggest point total question they have is, how closely do you align with our local objectives?
So you have local objectives. Will that then kind of be a separate answer or incorporated into a different, the body of a question for, because I guess I'm thinking, will they realize that there's an objective,
Yep.
an area objective based on a survey,
Yes.
so that they don't skim over that and not realize?
Yes. So we cover that. So we have an application workshop with all the potential applicants, and in that, and they're required to attend it if they want to apply for funding. And in that, we go over for them what the needs are as described in the plan and what the local objectives are that they have to meet. And we actually go over kind of the scoring rubric that we have and explain to them, here's your high point total questions, and you must meet a local objective. We can't fund things that don't. So the burden is on you to make the case that you do meet it. So we explain it to them in the workshop, and then in the application itself, the local objectives are actually listed out. They're part of the question, and they get the point totals that they could earn for each question as well. So, we make it as clear to them as we can. I can't guarantee you that every single person that's ever applied has fully understood, everything, but I think no one can say we didn't tell them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, now here's the other question I
Okay.
have, and it's the one that every organization, I'm sure every city, anybody that has a process improvement in place, how do you measure outcome after all this?
So, in terms of the outcome that the agencies are providing,
Whether it be the city programs for economics
Sure.
and rehabilitation, all that, and the individual non-for-profits.
so I think that is a great way to tie it back to the survey itself. So as I said, we have determined these categories and these individual lines within the categories based on something that HUD has called matrix codes. And the matrix codes are how HUD is measuring the outcomes. So when we fund an agency, whether it's a city agency or city program or a nonprofit program, it has to meet one of these matrix codes, and each matrix code has a very specific measurement attached to it. So if you are operating a youth program, there's a matrix code for youth program, and it tells you how you have to count up who it is that you're serving. And the same is for housing, and the same is for senior programs, and the same is for economic development. So it kind of brings us back full circle to this survey of like, why is it set up this way? In part because we have to end up that way. If we're gonna have to end up in those categories, why would we start with something that is totally unrelated to those categories rather than tying it together from beginning to end, if that makes sense. So we're gonna have to end up in these categories no matter what we do. So if we're gonna have to end up there, we might as well start there, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Okay.
And that's fine.
Okay.
It leads me to think how categories like housing is becoming a growing issue.
It is.
What's our measurement that what we're doing is in the right path? And we alone can't do it, obviously.
Absolutely.
All, it's a city as a whole, organization as a whole, the nonprofits, all working collaboratively.
Yes.
And it's just being able to like, how are we making a difference in our community measurement?
Yeah, and I think HUD intends for us to be mindful of that by requiring the two studies that I mentioned. The first one is the housing needs assessment. The housing needs assessment is focused on specifically the affordability and availability of housing to low and moderate income households. That's the whole purpose of the housing needs assessment, and we are required to do it. The second study is called the Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice, and the purpose of that study is the access to affordable, decent, and safe housing by protected classes, regardless of income level. So HUD requires that study. So I think HUD intends us to be mindful of particular things by requiring particular studies, and then requiring that we take those into account when we do our plan. So the intention with the timing of all of this is that those studies, hopefully by the time, they're expecting them to be done in September, but they don't always, keep to their timeline. But our hope is they'll be done September, October at least. And then we will have them in hand by the time that we're doing our application process. But what I will say too is, and we say this all the time, every community needs affordable housing, every single one. And we're going to get the studies and it's going to tell us that, but I can tell you today, now, without those studies, we need it. So it will undoubtedly be a thing that's including in the plan, because it's been included in every plan we've ever had going back for 50 years as we start the 50th year of CDBG. So there will be housing in the new plan. I don't have to have a crystal ball to know that. I just, history and practice and reality of the world is that it will be there. So, and the studies will support exactly what kinds of things we need. So for example, in the last housing needs assessment that we did, it lists, it kind of says, yes, every community needs affordable housing. What types are you especially short on, or what do you need to really focus on? And some of the things that came out of those studies the last time around were larger units. So, we have a lot of maybe affordable 1 and 2 bedrooms, but we don't have a lot of affordable 3 and 4 bedrooms, for example. Affordable accessible units, so people who need an accessible unit, maybe there aren't a lot of them out there, and the ones that are, I'm paraphrasing, are maybe not as affordable as they need them to be. So that was something that came out of the last one. So these studies will say you need affordable housing, but it will hopefully help us hone in on specific types of housing that we are especially in need of them.
One more question, I promise I'll stop.
No, it's a great conversation.
So we have an organization that has been absolutely ramping up and making an impact on our community, such as Humility Homes.
Okay.
They do studies. They have numbers of people that they take in, and serve. The YWCA Empowerment Center is another one that has branched out and grown and is doing similar, where they track, they almost take a census of every person that they do. Humility also does it. But then, and I don't know the depth and breadth of Salvation Army, I think that's more, is that more emergency?
They have some longer term programs as well. They do a lot with housing and affordable housing, specifically with homeless and homeless prevention.
And then the housing cluster, and I'm trying to think what other ones that are out there that I know they have to keep that information, they have to collect that data for a million reasons.
Sure.
But they could be something that could provide reports to,
Sure.
providing for citizens who reside
Yeah.
in getting these services in the city of Davenport.
Yeah,
I
so
guess.
most of the agencies that you name, we already fund with CDBG, and so we already get their information.
Okay.
Because we're already counting it, because
Yeah.
we're funding them. So, but also specifically agencies that work, especially with homeless and homeless prevention, they receive federal dollars over and above and beyond what we provide. There's some grants called ESG, COC, and HOPWA that HUD provides that are specific to homelessness. And those do not come down through the city, they come through the state directly to the agency. But if you receive those, if you're an agency and you receive those dollars, you are required to enter your information into a separate system, which is called HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System, and we have access to that. So we don't have to go straight to the agencies to get that information. We can get it from HMIS at the state level because that's where the dollars flow. So definitely all these different pieces and parts will come into play, not just through our own, initiative to research it, but that's exactly the kind of data that the consultants that we've hired are looking at. They pull down that information as well. Things like eviction rates, things like homeless services, all those kinds of things. They look at that as part of their housing needs assessment.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you for asking the questions. Great questions.
Any other comments? I believe that was the last item on our agenda, so I will entertain an motion to adjourn.
Wait.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
Okay, I see on the thing, there's a CAC vacancy.
Yes,
Okay, now, that's under which alderman?
that is the 8th ward.
That's Paul Reinhardt, okay.
And I was just told yesterday that he believes he has an appointment for it. And so hopefully we will have that vacancy filled at our next meeting.
Okay, I still want to talk. I still want my thunder. I would like to make a motion that we do not attend or have an August and September meeting unless business comes up that we should be here. And then we would reconvene in October of this year.
Do I have a second?
I just have one question to that. There is a workshop.
I think, I'll second, and then we can discuss.
All right, go ahead.
Nope, I second, and now you can ask your question.
Question is, do we get invited to the workshop or not the workshop? Yeah, right? If we want in order to see how it works, is that before October? Okay.
No, the application workshop is usually the end of November, and we will send that out to all of you. But we also will send out all of the things we've talked about, the input opportunities, both for the 5-year plan that we will be operating, but also the input opportunities that the consultant will be undertaking for the housing needs assessment and the analysis of impediments. We'll send all of that stuff out to you when we have dates for them.
Okay, and
I will call the vote.
calling the vote on the move to delay our next meeting until October, which would be the August,
October 7th.
Right, which were the 2 meetings that
We would be,
5th and 9th.
staff does not anticipate any business at this time for the August or September meetings, because we will be out doing our public input and gathering our information, working with our consultant. So we're hoping to have information to bring back to you in October. So that's why we would be letting the CAC know we don't expect any business in August or September. So if you chose to cancel, it would be fine. If something pressing arose, we would let the chair know, and the chair would summon you back.
I just forgot the date that it was on for each month. That was my.
Sorry.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Have a good day, everyone.